Make sure this is working. Make it. Hi, Jose and Regina, if you're there.
¿Cómo está, José? Rabbi, I don't know if you received the email from Lizzie today.
No, I didn't. I don't think so. But I've been in school for a while, so I haven't checked my email for quite a few hours.
I bring the suggestion to make that I will run an high holiday Rosh Hashanah Yamim Noraim class in Spanish with explanation.
Oh, very nice.
For Tuesday at 6, because I know that you are off, so there's nothing on Tuesday.
That's true.
Yes, so that's why I like Tuesday, to keep like busy the schedule and not interfering with anything with you. So I suggested it, and Lizzie sent an email, and I said to them, look, if I see that someone is interested, I will be more than happy. So let's see if someone answers. Just, I will not do anything if no one say, hey, I'm interested, okay? Like it's not for my ego. That's okay. If no one wants, that's okay. Okay, less work for me preparing a class. But I think it could be nice to explain more in Spanish, more in deep.
I absolutely agree. You know, every now and then when I'm doing a sermon or teaching something like today's Lunch and Learn about tshuva, you know, I recognize that a lot of the language I'm using it's not the easiest English. And you know, I wish I could do that in a different language like Spanish that would help spread that to a broader audience. But yeah, my Spanish, I can barely ask, you know, where's the bathroom? So
yeah,
if you're willing to do that, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so just let you know, okay, in case that you hear or someone asks you, you know what it's about.
I have been informed.
Good.
All right, how are we doing, everybody? Looks like we've got a number of people logged in, both to YouTube and to Zoom. We'll give it just one more minute to settle down the connections. My notes say that we are picking up on chapter 2, Mishnah 8.
Huh? I thought we finished 2. Didn't we go a little above? No, I guess not.
That's what my record said. Because
we're supposed to start today, Mishnah, chapter 2, Mishnah 8, correct?
Right.
All right.
Because the last 3 are about a special issues regarding the days of fasting and how they fit into other Jewish issues. So, chapter 2, Mishnah 8. Just one more check on the clock. See if we've got people logged in. I think we can probably go ahead and start safely. Okay, so this one's going to take a little bit of explanation, but I want to go ahead and get the first opinion out there, often called the Tanakama, the original baseline text. With regards to every day, about which it is written in the scroll of fasts, right, Megillat Taanit, one may not eulogize on the preceding day. It is prohibited. One may not eulogize. I need to put in better commas. With regards to those days about which it is written in the scroll of fasts, one may not eulogize, comma, there should be a comma there. On the preceding day, it is prohibited, but on the following day, it is permitted. Okay, so what's happening here? So in Judaism, there is a different concept of what a eulogy, a hesped, is supposed to be. In Jewish thinking, the eulogy is not supposed to just be a celebration of life, a tribute to their achievements, or a joyful reflection. A eulogy is meant to make everybody cry. That is its job in classical Jewish text. The idea is you are eulogizing the person, not to say how wonderful they are for their honor, although that is part of it, but to remind everyone how much worse we are off now that this person is dead. A eulogy is supposed to make you miss the person. It is supposed to make you sore, heartache for them no longer being alive, and to make you weep. Now, there's a lot of reasons why you don't see that kind of eulogizing nowadays. Negatively, it's because many people are afraid of talking about death and afraid of talking about what we have lost. More positively, it is because many people are able to live to a ripe old age, to have had a life that has been mostly joyous and in which we have had a long time to say goodbye as a person maybe battles an illness to before they reach their final leaving of this world. That means many people feel resolved. They have closure, to use the modern terminology, before the person has left, and therefore they don't need to feel the same naked grief from the sudden shock of loss. And also, like I said, since many people do pass mostly in their older years, we don't feel the same pain of tragedy. Reach their final leaving of this world. I think someone might be unmuted that I'm hearing through the other system. All right. Need to make sure that it's only one copy of my voice coming through. Otherwise, it gets really weird. If you're watching also on YouTube, make sure you've muted the YouTube while watching. If you're also on the Zoom, or was I? Right, so that means we don't find the same heartache, pain, full, racking with tears eulogies as often as they used to be, which is a shame in my opinion, because the hesped was supposed to begin the process of a lut, of mourning. Before this, in Onenut, we were in shock with the death. And again, this is the ancient world because death usually came suddenly. Even a person with a long illness might only last a few days. You were in shock until the burial, which came very quickly. And only with the beginning of the burial and the hesped, the eulogizing, do you begin to truly weep? Do you begin to truly unload that sense of loss? I personally think that people should try to find time to cry, no matter how full the life was, no matter how beautiful it was, no matter how prepared the person was to leave this world. I think an important part of grief and of having the experience that allows us to truly celebrate their life involves tears. But whatever you want to say about modern psychology, the ancient world, a eulogy meant crying. You have to have that in mind. Now, that means that we now have a question of, well, wait a minute. Why would there be certain days when we don't eulogize? Well, there are certain days, for example, all of the holidays, where if we had to do a burial, we would not do this type of eulogy. For example, during Hanukkah, Purim, Hol HaMoed, the intermediate days of a holiday, we would not do this type of eulogizing. And that was because you were not meant to deliberately, excessively make yourself sad during these other joyous occasions. Everybody following that logic? Right? Since this was a deliberate attempt to generate weeping, it was withheld during that time.
I thought that the reason was because you try to don't want to avoid interrupting the national feelings, the national mood, like you are under the nation. So if all the Am Israel is feeling for having a holiday in some way, you don't want an individual pushing the rest of the people.
Right. So that's definitely true in general, but that applies more to the issue of Shiva, of requiring people to come and visit during Shiva. Because like you said, the national mood, the community mood is with the celebration, and asking them to end their celebration for your Shiva, your mourning, is not appropriate. But this is also for the immediate family members who do have an obligation to bury and do have an obligation to feel the grief, that they are not allowed to do this excessive amount of mourning or intentional grief raising. And that's then what leads to the second half of this first sentence is, well, what about the day before? And indeed, this is still the custom. The day before a holiday, we also do not do that type of eulogizing. So if it is Erev Rosh Hashanah coming up next week, meaning the daytime of Friday, we would not do a eulogy that was designed specifically to generate maximum tears. We would still do a funeral, we would still remind ourselves of the person's life, but it would not be deliberately tuned to hit this high note of excessive is the wrong word, this high note of copious weeping. However, the day after a holiday, so let's imagine, we're the day after Rosh Hashanah, it is permitted to do that kind of eulogy, even though you're still in the coming down time, when you're still feeling the joy of the holiday, it is still appropriate to retune your eulogy for maximum emotional impact. Rabbi Yosei, on the other hand, he disagrees. It is forbidden to mourn both on the preceding day and on the following day, right? So he says that the day before and the day after you can't do this, which means as well, one may not fast on the preceding day and on the following day. But Rabbi Yossi says on the preceding day it is forbidden, but on the following day it is permitted. So with regards to fasting, which is how we get into Taanit for this discussion, if it says you may not fast on this day, and there are days on the calendar when we are not allowed to set fasts, we're going to see them in the next Mishnah, then the day before and on the day after, it is allowed to fast. But Rabbi Yossi says, no, the days have this greater effect, just like the no eulogizing days, and you're not allowed to fast beforehand, but you are allowed to fast after. So he does allow for the option of fasting afterwards. So he is consistent in the sense that he believes the effect of the day, the emotional impact of the day, covers a larger area than the other sages do. And when they reduce the area, he reduces his area too. So he is being consistent in both of these different issues.
Our tackle today is not following more or less Rabbi Yossi.
No, we follow the sages. We follow the Tanakama. So,
no Rabbi Yossi, because sometimes for the high holiday, for example, you don't say tackle the day before neither.
Correct, but that was the opinion.
The day after.
But that was the opinion of the sages, is that we don't say it before. Now, yes, there are some that will extend, but it's to the day after. But the majority and the tradition that I was raised was that we wouldn't say Tachanun, we wouldn't do this type of eulogizing the day before a holiday, but the day after a holiday we would.
So it's by Rabbi Yossi.
No, Rabbi Yossi says you don't do it before or after.
So he said before
for the eulogizing.
After is permitted.
For the eulogizing.
Okay.
For the fasting, the sages said that the day before and day after are perfectly fine. And Rabbi Yossi said, only the day before we don't. Does that make sense?
Rabbi.
Yes.
What was that you were saying about when the sages condense the area, Rabbi Yossi condenses the area too?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Okay, so in the first half, we're talking about days when you can't eulogize.
Right.
And that is, according to the sages, the day before, but not after. But according to Rabbi Yossi, it is the day before and the day after. The second half is about days when we can't fast. According to the sages, the day before and the day after are both fine. They have reduced the coverage of the day. From being day +1, they've gone to day +0. And Rabbi Yossi goes from day +1 before, +1 after, to being only day +1 before, day +0 after. So there's a parallel in the sense that they both treat the window or the umbrella regarding fasting as being smaller than they did of the don't eulogize it.
Just out of curiosity, what's this? Did they lay out a specific reason on why the day after is worse than the day before?
It's not worse. It's actually less.
I mean,
right?
like
So
worse the fast on the day after then.
What's that? Well, it's the question is the psychology of the day. Is that something that comes in the buildup or in the after effect? And the general view seems to be that it is the buildup that is most significant. That if you are preparing for a holiday, you've already begun taking on certain attitudes, certain emotions of the coming holiday. And therefore, to do something before it would seem more problematic than doing something after it. That's why the sages generally treat the day before in the no eulogize section as more serious. And why Rabbi Yossi, consistent to himself, treats the day before as still being more serious when it comes to not fasting.
But wouldn't it be hard to, if it's a festive holiday, wouldn't it be a little disruptive to be preparing for a fast the day after?
Well, not necessarily, because preparing for a fast meant that you ate the day before, and on a festival, you're definitely eating on the festival.
Right.
And plus, we do have a lot more experience getting over the mood of a day rather than building up to the mood of the day. If we talk about the most common Jewish holiday, Shabbat, right? There is much that is said and done and taught about how to spend your Friday afternoon or even your Friday morning in preparation of Friday night and Shabbat, on Saturday day. Indeed, we think about, what we're going to make for Shabbat and how we're going to spend Shabbat, who we're going to invite for Shabbat. That takes up a lot of our preceding time. But when Shabbat's over, we do Havdalah, Shabbat's gone, and we're back to work, right? Hopefully, yes, there was a bit of an afterglow. There is still a bit of an after feeling, but the atmosphere changes more abruptly at the end of Shabbat than it does at the beginning, which is a much longer buildup towards that day's special feeling. Okay. Now you know why I wanted to make sure we saved 8, 9, and 10 for this week rather than doing them last week, because I knew there was a lot that we needed to talk about. All right. 9, Mishnah 9. They do not decree upon the community a fast to begin on a Thursday in order not to cause a rise in market prices. Okay. Ancient economies, well, not ancient economies, classical economies. You don't shop at a supermarket, right? In fact, you don't generally shop the day before you need something. Some things, yes, you can, but most of the time you are shopping for what you need on the day you need it. That was true in most communities all the way up until the middle of the 20th century, right? You would go to the baker for your bread that day. You would go to the butcher for your meat that day. You go to the vegetable market for your vegetables that day. The introduction of canned goods and the introduction of refrigerated shipping and fast shipping by plane and train and boats and all of that radically changes how we now get food. So this probably is not going to make a lot of sense. Put yourself back 150 years or 1,000, 2,000 years if you really want to do it. And you are preparing for Shabbat. Well, what is your last shopping day if you want to get stuff ready so you can start cooking as soon as possible on Friday morning? Because remember, cooking was like a full day experience if you were cooking not only for Friday, Friday meaning your meal of that morning, but also your meal for that evening, and you were cooking for the meal of Shabbat and the meal for Seudah Shlishi for the end of Shabbat, right? Friday was your big cooking day. You wanted to start early. So when are you going to do your shopping? Thursday. Why also you're also shopping on Thursday? What do we know about why Monday and Thursday were chosen as the days when we read Torah during the daily minyan? These were the market days. right? So this was the day when most people had brought things into the market, from the surrounding countryside. So there were more farmers and more sellers and everything there. And that meant you had a better selection. So now all the people come into the market and they decree that a fast is going to begin on this Thursday. So that means what's everybody doing? Well, there's going to be a panic on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to try and buy up everything that they can so that they will have something after Thursday to be able to make for Shabbat. So everything gets thrown out of a whack by how people are shopping. And that means that there is a possibility of two issues. One, price gouging, meaning that people know that everyone is going to be panicked about how to prepare for Shabbat, and so they can jack their prices beforehand. We've seen this in many other issues in rabbinic literature, both in Talmud as well as in later responses of people trying to jack prices for Shabbat buyers. But there was also the issue that the rabbis might have been concerned that if everybody was panic buying, and because there was a fast decreed, that means that the sellers may think that there is indeed a shortage, right? This is causing a run on the produce, and that's going to cause them to believe that there is a true famine that we are entering. And what happens when there is a famine? The price goes up, right? The idea of price gouging is not new during catastrophes. It's unfortunately been going around for a long time. Some of it is reprehensible. Some of it is simply inevitable. There's the very famous story during the time of Elisha of the four lepers who were outside the gates even after the enemy army had left, and there was going to be a huge amount of grain, which would cause a price collapse. So you can see in that story as well about the whole issue of how prices can fluctuate when people believe there is a famine. And
so they went to the market during the fast day. So that's what they were concerned.
So this would cause a panic was the concern, exactly. So instead, because they didn't want to double up fast day plus Shabbat preparation shopping, they instead tried to give people more time to plan so it wouldn't cause this rushed panic. So it continues. Rather, the first three fasts are held in this order: Monday, Thursday, Monday. And the second three, which remember are continuing on, Thursday, Monday, Thursday. Now, the second three aren't a problem, even though they start on a Thursday, because the first three have already happened and everyone already knows what's going on. So there's no room for panic. There's already been a week notice. There's already been plenty of time for people to get their shopping in order, and no one's going to be stampeding Black Friday shopping at the marketplace, causing price runs. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Rabbi Yosef, on the other hand, says, just as the first three should not begin on a Thursday, so too the second should not begin, nor the last, meaning the 7 days and the last run. So he is still saying, look, I'm still worried about this issue. We need to make sure we never start on a Thursday in any of the runs. He loses the argument, but he just wanted to be more careful to make sure that there wouldn't be this issue. Of course, if you do that, you delay the length, you delay how often the fasts are coming, because that means you would have to wait from the end of one fast until the, if you go Monday, Thursday, Monday, you would have to wait until the next Monday to start the next set. All right. Mishnah 10, the final one of chapter 3 or chapter 2. They do not ordain upon the community a fast on Rosh Chodesh, on Hanukkah, or on Purim. But if they had already begun, meaning one of the sets of fasts, they do not interrupt the fasts. The words of Rabban Gamliel. So what he is saying is, look, you would never deliberately start a fast on Rosh Chodesh, right? Because it's Rosh Chodesh. Or you would never deliberately start a fast on Purim, because it's Purim, right? Purim is a holiday, and you would never try to deliberately jump the joyous feeling of the holiday with the seriousness of the fast. However, if your fast cycle, day, has already begun. Hi, Ilana.
Were you not muted?
No.
He was not muted.
God. Okay.
That's okay. You know, that's life. By the way, her hair is getting really long. Is she going to cut it for like to donate it?
No.
She just wants to have the long hair. That's fine. That's fine.
Kind of, yes.
Kind of, yes.
She has her issues.
We'll talk about it another time.
Yeah.
It looks good. It looks good. Okay, so back to the idea. If it's already begun, and then, lo and behold, Rosh Chodesh starts when it should be a fast day, they allow that to go ahead and take place, to have the fast day on that day. Remember, in the ancient world, they were identifying when months began visually. This was not on a printed calendar. That's going to be really important for the second half of this Mishnah. So that meant that they wouldn't know when Rosh Chodesh was going to begin. They had a guess if it'd be this day or that day, but they couldn't predict in advance precisely which day. So maybe it'll be Thursday, maybe it won't be Thursday. If they began it and it turned out that it was Thursday, you went ahead and kept fasting anyway on Thursday and treated it as a fast day. Rabbi Meir said, even though Rabban Gamliel said the fast should not be interrupted, he agrees that they should not complete their fast, meaning don't treat it as being a full fast day. Remember, we talked a little bit earlier about how you could finish a fast a bit earlier than the full day.
I thought it was more about half day, like 12 hours.
Well, it's debatable exactly what considers part of a day or all of the day in the early afternoon or what have you. It wasn't about having the daylight fast. It was about making the daylight fast even shorter. And the same applies to the 9th of Av, should it fall on Friday. All right, so this is a problem we never have to worry about, right? Because of the way we worked out the calendar 1600 years ago, it's been scheduled to make sure that we always know when Tisha B'Av is coming, and Tisha B'Av is never observed on Shabbat. It can be observed Saturday night, but it would never be coming right before Shabbat itself. That was something that was worked out in the calendar by very precise calculations of the leap years, which again, every time I look into the calendar, it's just amazing how precise they were and how much they took into consideration when mapping it out. And we really have to be very, very grateful to our ancestors for being so careful with how they put together the calendar that we have inherited.
And without computer.
What's that?
And without computers.
No, they had the best computer, the brain. But they were very, very careful and worked very, very well to make it line up so that we would avoid some of the problems that could happen when the months were spotted visually. And that was a difficulty our ancestors had to deal with that they made sure we did not. Okay. Any questions then before we leave chapter 2? Okay. Chapter 3. Oh, let me just get the line up. Oh, come on. Sorry, my mouse disappeared again. Okay, I really have to get different software. All right. Chapter 3, Mishnah 1. The order of public fasts mentioned above is enacted because of, meaning the lack of, the first rain. But if the crops have undergone an unusual change, they sound a blast immediately. Similarly, if the rain has stopped for 40 days between one rainfall and the next, they sound a blast immediately because it is a plague of drought. So you may remember way back when we first started talking about all of this, that there was that whole long period of waiting. We don't start praying. We don't start, the minor fasts of individuals or the community fasts until this point has passed and that point has passed and this. That was all about the first rain. However, if the first rain happened and then you don't have any more for 40 days, then bam, we are already in a catastrophe. We don't have to begin the initial step up process of ever escalating severity of fast. We go straight to the shofar blowing and straight to the idea that we are in trouble now. And so too, if the crops have undergone this unusual change, if there is this transformation in them that shows that there is a problem in how they are developing, we don't have to do the wait and see and let's be cautious and maybe it's not such a problem, maybe this just happened. It is pull the alarm bell, sound the shofar, we are in danger zone now, and jump straight to that level of concern. So the initial rains, if they were late, they were late. And maybe it's okay, maybe it's not, we'll see, we'll slowly escalate. But once the rain has begun, if it suddenly stops and goes 40 days with no rain, then now we are in a big problem, right? Because once those plants have started growing, once the seeds have, germinated, and they've begun pushing through and their sprouts are coming up, if they don't get water, or if they begin to look like they are struck by some sort of blight, some sort of other disease for the crop, then we're in trouble now. We don't need to wait for this other period of escalation to find out if this is bad. Because once they're up, they're much more vulnerable. Make sense? Good. Mishnah 2. If rain falls for crops but not for trees, for the trees but not for crops, for both of these but not for cisterns, ditches, and caves, they sound a blast immediately. All right, so I'm not a farmer, but I've had to learn about farming because of studying Talmud and Mishnah. So this is what I understand from the commentaries that were written by people that were farmers. That apparently there are certain types of rain, certain intensities of rain, that in the land of Israel and the other areas of the ancient Near East, that if you had a light rain, it might be good for the crops, but not enough for the trees. Meaning the crops would still be able to sort of survive, but the trees would be in trouble. On the other hand, certain very intense rain, kind of like we get here in Florida from what I gather, is great for the trees because it gets right down in the roots and really helps fuel them, but it is too strong. It will wash away and flood the fields for the small crops, and that means it's bad for them. And likewise, there can be rains that will be good enough for your crops and good enough for your trees, but not quite enough to begin to fill up all of the cisterns, the giant water tanks that were made by the communities to store the water that was used by the people. So it's kind of like it's enough for now, but not enough to raise that water supply for the area. So you had to get just the right kind of rain overall. If the rain was only helping the crops and not the trees, sound the shofar. If it's only helping the trees and not the crops, if it's only helping the crops and trees, but not helping the general water supply, then we are blasting that shofar. If you are beginning to get the feeling that rain is really, really important in Israel, you are getting the right feeling, right? Rain matters immensely. We talked about this way back in chapter 1 with the different blessings concerning rain, but this should be driving it really home that rain is not just, did it rain, but how much rain, what kind of rain, how much rain per hour. Was the rain following on this slope of the mountain or that slope of the mountain? Was it going into the the cisterns are not going into the cisterns. Rain was critical, and little hint, it is still incredibly important in the land of Israel. Natan?
There is a national sport in Israel to know what is the level of the Kinneret.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone knows. You can ask anyone in the street. Everyone knows exactly how many centimeters or meters is the Kinneret in red or in black. Okay, and everyone knows because it's very important. Without enough water for the Kinneret, everyone will suffer.
They know it better than they know the stock market.
Yeah.
Right? Because the stock market, unless all my money's in that and it's going down, I don't really need to know what it is today. But the water supply for me, for everyone else, for all of our food, that we all have a very important interest, and there's very little you can do about it except pray for more rain or save the water that you have. Aaron.
Hey, Rabbi, and maybe it's more Babylon than Israel, but I heard part of the reason they had so many wars in that area was because the land was said to be really good land between Babylon and Israel.
So the land of Israel, like in terms of its fertility, indeed is very good land, but it is very dependent upon the rain and very dependent upon good land management. That was one reason why the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and the Jubilee years were so important for giving the land time to rest. Whereas the land in Babylon or the land in Egypt, those were both river valley societies where the land was being refertilized by the river floods and irrigation was done by manual labor rather than done by mostly rain. Meaning you could dig canals and you could make pumps and you could carry buckets, and shortages of water were much rarer if you lived in the river valleys of the Tigris Euphrates or in Egypt by the Nile, or also within China and India as well. But obviously Israel is much closer to the other two. Right. But the land of Israel was very important for Babylon and Egypt as well, because it was the border to allow their empires to expand towards the other rich river valley on the other side.
But Jordan, they couldn't use Jordan to irrigate stuff?
You mean the Jordan River?
Yeah.
Oh, they did. And indeed, if you remember, when Abraham and Lot are trying to decide how to split up, Lot specifically goes down to the Jordan River Valley because that was a place that was beautiful like a garden. It was much easier. Whereas, and if you've ever stood in the Judean hills, which is where they were standing when they were making that decision, you're standing in an area which, don't get me wrong, I think is beautiful. It's one of the most picturesque parts of all of Israel, in my opinion. But it's a little rough. It's rocky, it's hilly. It is not a place where you would normally think, hey, let's build a farm. Down on the plain by the Jordan Valley, absolutely, let's farm that. It's flat, it's green, there's lots of water in the river, much, much easier. So yeah, absolutely the Jordan was possible, but you couldn't irrigate the entire country from the Jordan River. One, it's not big enough, and two, no easy way to pump water uphill. Not in the ancient world. And nowadays, of course, there are simply too many people that have a need for getting water from the Kinneret, from the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. So there's not quite enough water, which is why Israel has such very good water saving technology and also such amazing advances in desalination of getting water from the ocean. Okay, Mishnah 3. See, aren't we learning so much about the Weather Channel? And so too, a city upon which no rain has fallen, as it is written, and I caused it to rain upon one city, and I caused it not to rain upon another city. One piece was rained upon, taking from the prophet Amos. That city fasts, and they sound a blast. But those in the places around it fast, but do not sound the alarm. Rabbi Akiva says they sound the alarm, but do not fast. All right, so what's going on here? So you may remember, as I mentioned way back at the beginning when we were first talking about the signs of catastrophe, that they were slowly escalating their concern. And they weren't sure, is this really a divine issue? Is this just a climate issue? What's going on here? If you see that one city's getting plenty of rain and the other city's getting no rain, you don't have to do the math to figure out that there's a problem in the city with no rain, right? This is as clear as you can get as a sign of divine displeasure. And indeed, this would be exceedingly rare to happen by anything like a natural set of circumstances. I know we joke in Orlando that it can be raining in my front yard and sunny in the backyard, and that is true in general. But if I mean in specific that it can happen, occasionally, but over the season, the front and back get roughly the same amount of rain. And so too does, Sanford to the north and Claremont to the south. If you spread out the greater Orlando area, roughly the cities and the communities are getting a similar amount of rain. If you were to see that Winter Springs got rain and Castleberry didn't, two communities that are next door to each other, you would begin to wonder what's wrong with Castleberry. And that's what the prophet Amos is talking about, and that's what the rabbis are talking about. That you don't need a clearer sign than it's raining here and not next door. Because if the rains are coming but missing you, then there's something you need to think about why they may be missing. Okay, so the first half, that seems quite clear, yes? Okay, it's the second half that gets more fascinating. That city fasts and they sound a blast, meaning they do the shofar blows, and they will begin their own cycle of fasting in that city. Now that makes perfect sense. They call themselves to God's attention. They ask God to remember them. They are pleading for God's mercy and compassion, and they are fasting in order to direct their mind to their actions, to be sure that they've done nothing that they have not done tshuva for, that they have repented for any of their misdeeds and stopped them to make sure that they are living the right way. But those around it, they are also fasting, but not sounding the alarm. Well, wait a minute. Why would they be fasting, right? It's not my problem. It's their problem, right? If city A isn't getting the water, why should city B be doing self-reflection about what's going on? Guess what? We're all in the same boat. Right? We are all tied. We are all connected to the same rudder. So if city A is having trouble, city B is going to be in trouble soon too. Even if they still get plenty of rain, well, city A is going to need help from city B, and city B may not have enough food to feed both of them. So city B as well needs to see themselves as being part of the solution. And this first opinion is saying being part of the solution means fasting as well. Now, they don't do the shofar because in the opinion of the first opinion, it's a bit redundant, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Sounding the alarm is about calling God's attention, asking God for remembrance. Well, city B is not the one that's actually drying up. So for them to call attention doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, views it a little differently. He says they sound the alarm, but they do not fast. Right? They don't fast because, again, fasting is generally seen as being you are looking for your own cause of what might be this issue. And since city B is getting plenty of rain, fasting doesn't make much sense. On the other hand, sounding the alarm isn't about getting God to notice them. It is about getting them to notice the problem of the other city, right? So this time, the blast of the shofar is not about calling attention to God. It's not about saying, hey, God, help me, save me. It's about saying, hey, guys, we need to go help them, right? This is the ringing of the fire bell, not to call somebody from a distance, but ringing the fire bell to get everybody to help put out the fire who's already there. And that's sort of the difference of attitude between the two groups. Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Rabbi. Hey, just out of curiosity, does the Talmud talk about this when you have two major Jewish communities in different countries, mainly Babylon and Israel?
So that doesn't really work quite the same way, because they are talking about country or cities and countries that are subject to the same normal weather patterns, right? So, it rains here in Florida, it doesn't rain in Israel. We can't really compare the two.
Yeah, I thought
very different climates.
Yeah, but didn't you say earlier that one of the reasons was to get God to recognize that the city next door needs help? Washington.
I'm sorry, one more time?
Wasn't one of the reasons you said they fasted or sounded the shofar was because they were asking for help for the city next to them?
Yes, exactly. Right. So that they are the first opinion about blasting is about getting help. Yes. So the shofar, like I said, has a couple different uses. One is the shofar can be an alarm call to God. God, please have mercy on us.
Right.
And the other is it can be an alarm call to the citizens. We need to help.
So if there's enough distance between two communities, this doesn't apply then, right?
If there's enough distance where you would not be surprised that they have different weather, then yes, it wouldn't apply. Now, I should point out that there is a alternative way of reading Rabbi Akiva, where it could be actually in keeping with sort of what we do on Yom Kippur. What we do on Rosh Hashanah, right? On Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar to call our attention to God and to ask for God's mercy, right? If you ever have stayed all the way through our Musaf service, I know a lot of people leave early. Don't know why. Don't know what else you're going to be doing on Rosh Hashanah except enjoying the beautiful spiritual moments. But that's my own little tochacha, my own little rebuke for those who leave early. But if you stay all the way through, you'll know that there is the section that is called shofarot, and when you read through it, you recognize that the symbolism of it is very much about using the shofar to call our attention to God and to call God's attention to us as an act of compassion. So that's another way of understanding this opinion. All right, let's move on to Mishnah 4. Okay, we've got a few more problems that can happen in your town. God forbid they ever should. And so to a city which has a plague, meaning an illness kind of plague, or collapses, meaning there's an earthquake probably and something falls down. That city fasts and they sound a blast, but those in places around it fast but do not sound the alarm. And again, Rabbi Akiva says they sound the alarm but do not fast. What constitutes a plague? Something that's a very interesting question for our own day. If in a city that can supply 500 foot soldiers and 3 deaths occur in 3 consecutive days, behold, this constitutes a plague. Less than this is not a plague. All right, so I'll leave this to the mathematicians, but it's a little bit hard to work out exactly the numbers. But basically it's saying if there are 500 adults that are able to go out and be soldiers, meaning 500 men of military age, then if 3 people die within that city, and that happens within 3 consecutive days, then that is considered to be an abnormal number of death from illness. All right, that is a plague. So I'm not quite sure what, 3 deaths out of a population that's able to field 500 people over the course of 3 days, what that counts as, but in their mind, that was considered noticeable. So it's not a high death rate, but it is definitely a significant one. We're not talking Black Death, but definitely they would have been facing plagues like this quite often. Now, that precise number is interesting only because people debate what constitutes an epidemic or pandemic in our current COVID situation. But the last half is also very interesting, that if there are fewer people dying than that, or they are more spread out, then we don't consider that to be a plague that triggers our response of fasting and the sounding of the shofar. But that's life, right? The people got sick, people died. This happens. We don't have to attribute this as being a divine act against the city, or even necessarily against those people. Moving on to Mishnah 5, hearing no objection. Okay, oh, there we are. More things that could go wrong. For these, they sound a blast in all places, meaning near and far, whether it's happening to you or happening to your neighbor. For the drying up of crops, meaning when there is a severe heat, even if there was plenty of water, sometimes the wind could whip in from the Jordanian desert and just dry up all of the crops. For plant disease, of course, for locusts, for the hasil, which is apparently another type of locust, for wild beasts, specifically a wild beast that would be out, and we'll talk about whether it needs to be dangerous or just seen in habited areas. We take it for granted that we are safe walking through our neighborhoods. They had to be a little bit more careful of bears, lions, and wolves and other types of animals. And for the sword, they sound a blast, for these are plagues likely to spread. You know, you can't just say it happened to that city. You have to believe it could be happening anywhere at any time once this has begun. Just like an illness, where once it's begun in one city, there is a chance it will spread to the next. I should point out that the commentators say that when it comes to, for the sword, when they're talking about that, they don't mean active warfare. They mean even if it's just soldiers on the march. And indeed, historically, soldiers on the march could be as much of a danger to their own people, even if not directly violent, but just because of the food that they would consume, or the loss of labor that they represented when they would be out making war. So they weren't only talking about warfare or siege, they were talking even about just soldiers in the field. Mishnah 6. Just a second, trying to get it lined up out. Good enough. It once happened that elders went down from Jerusalem to their own cities in order to fast, because there was seen in Ashkelon a shidaphon, which affected much grain as would fill an oven with loaves. Okay, what's happening here? There was this horrible drying wind that dried up crops in Ashkelon, which is like at one corner of Israel, way down in the south near the Mediterranean. And it only wiped out enough crop that you would be, if that had lived, you would have been able to make enough loaves to fill an oven, right? So that's not even so much. We're not talking about 50 acres. We're talking about a small section that dried up suddenly from this blasting furnace wind. Just because of that, the word went out from Jerusalem to all the cities to have a fast, to hope and to pray that that would not affect anywhere else in the country. That's how dangerous and how concerned they were about that kind of drying wind. Similarly, they also decreed a fast because wolves devoured 2 children on the other side of the Jordan. Again, more remote side of the land. Rabbi Yossi says, not because they devoured the children, but merely because they were seen, meaning somebody saw 2 wolves or saw wolves near 2 children and went, how in the world could it be that these animals have come into our neighborhoods, our towns, our places where our children are? Quick, everybody, this is dangerous. We need to fast. We need to be alert. We need to double check that this is not a problem that we have caused, but merely a random act of nature. And so they took that very, very seriously. Questions, comments? I just want to point out, but I think we can still get at least Mishnah 7 in, even with my little commentary. Just look at the way they viewed their country as interconnected. Something that happened in one corner was something that everybody was worried about. Whether or not they were actually fasting or blowing, depending upon the different types of calamities, they knew about it and they were concerned about it, and they would respond in some form or another. Even in the debate between Rabbi Akiva and the rest of the sages, some response was appropriate when they saw that there was a catastrophe somewhere among their fellows. And that connection, that sense of nation, of people, is very, very powerful in my opinion, and something that unfortunately has been a bit lost in the modern, more anonymous society, where many people wouldn't even know if there was a death in their neighbor's house, let alone a problem in another city. Okay, off my sermon, back to number 7. We will finish with number 7, I should point out right now. Don't get your hopes up. Number 8 is all about Choni, who is an incredibly important and interesting character. And so we are going to wrap it up with number 7 and save Choni for next week. For these matters, they sound a blast even on Shabbat. If the city is besieged by Gentile troops or by a river, all right, besieged by non-Jewish troops, I understand why that's a problem and we need to alert everyone. But a river? How do you besiege a city with a river? It's called flooding, right? When there is a flood, a city can be surrounded entirely by the water, or the water can inundate the streets itself. Or if a ship is foundering on the sea. Now, Rabbi Yossi says they sound a blast for help, but not for an outcry, meaning not for the sake of the prayer. Shimon the Yemenite, right, Hatmani, says also for a plague, but the sages do not agree with them. So what they're trying to say here is that even on Shabbat, when we do not normally have calling out to God, when we normally restrict ourselves from that kind of petitionary appeal for mercy, if these catastrophes are happening, then indeed we would sound the shofar. Now, the only debate is whether or not the sounding of the shofar on these times is intended as a cry for mercy, for prayer, or as an alarm bell, meaning everybody get up and go help because of the war, or run away from the soldiers, or because of the flood, or because there is a ship that is about to be broken apart in the water and we need to rescue the passengers, right? And then, like I said, there's the small disagreement about whether or not a plague should supersede Shabbat or not. And the sages generally say, a sudden plague we don't necessarily break Shabbat for. Again, the issue is of exactly what they could do to prevent it and deal with it, and how they wanted to or not interrupt Shabbat. But for these others, they were absolutely willing to essentially break the Sabbath peace in order to either move themselves to prayer or move themselves to action. Questions or comments on that last passage? Like I said, we'll be saving number 8 for next week, because there's no way we can do Choni in just a few minutes.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
Can we go over that window thing? Sorry, I know that's off topic.
Not right now, but I can send you an email that has a bit more information about it, and then we can discuss it, you and I, at another time.
All right.
So, Rabbi, I was still thinking about Rabbi Akiva. Why for him was so important to sound the shofar? Because he tried to make people more aware of God, and so pray for him, or for national pride, say, you know what, we are together, we are one big people. Let's be aware what happened with our neighborhood. What was the goal?
Well, so they are both of those goals are not mutually exclusive, right? To pray on behalf of those that we cannot help directly, and to help those directly, rather than resort only to prayer, are both very Jewish responses, right? If we have the ability to pray for somebody in need, we must. If we have the ability to help somebody in need, we must. even if that means we have to delay our prayers on their behalf. You know, the classic example of a person drowning in a river. If you can't swim, call for help and pray. If you can swim, dive in and try and save them. Don't pray first before diving in. Exactly which one he wanted to emphasize, that's a matter of debate. But both of them, I believe, are valid and can be contained within his opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Yasher Koach, for the shiur.
Always my pleasure. I should point out we will have class next Wednesday, but we will be not having class the following week, as we just need a little bit of a pause during the Yamim Noraim from all the busy schedule.
And we need to start thinking about the next one. The next
We do, because Taanit is almost done. It's a very short Masechet.
That's right. We got one more.
All right, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great night, and see you soon, I hope.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rabbi.
Bye.